Almost every website uses HTML forms to collect user input so that something can be done with that data, like saving it, searching for something, or logging a user in. To create a form, we'll need a pair of form tags. The opening form tag has a few attributes we need to fill in. First is an action attribute. This specifies where to send the form data when a form is submitted. After submitting our form, to what location do we want to send our form? The form submission is done with a backend language such as PHP. You might see a file name such as index.php or an action page or something like that. We're not going to do a form submission, but just be aware that the action attribute sends data to this location. You will also see a method. The method attribute specifies the HTTP method to use when sending form data. We have a GET request or a POST request. POST is used for confidential information such as username and password. GET is for insensitive data. Now, since we are going to create a form with sensitive user information, we use POST. Now let's create some elements within our form. The first thing we'll create is a text box, and we use a self-closing input element. So here's our text box. By default, the type is a text box, but we can specify that with the type attribute. Since we need text box, we just use the type text. There's other different types like numbers, email, telephone, passwords, but all of this we'll cover pretty soon in this video. Now we have this text box, but if a user sees this text box, they probably don't know what to enter. Let's create a label related to this text box. We're creating a pair of label tags that we can use to tell the user what the text box is all about. So in this case, we'll write your name. Good. So now we're telling the user, hey, you need to enter your name. But what if someone is using a screen reader, like if they're blind or visually impaired? We should add a for attribute. So what is this for? Well, this is for my name. Another benefit of adding the for attribute to a label is when you click on the label, your cursor will move to the text box. But for it to work, we also need a matching ID attribute within the input tag, so the ID is going to be the same name as the for attribute. Then when we click on the label, our cursor will move to the text box. Please note that each input field must have a name attribute to be submitted. If the name attribute is not there, the value of the input field will not be sent at all. It acts like a key in a key value pair that gets sent to the server when the form is submitted. It looks like this when a server receives it. We should create a submit button to submit our data at the end of our form. We'll create an input tag. We use the type submit for the submit button, but it currently doesn't do anything since we don't have a backend language to submit data to. Now let's add a password input and label. So same as before, we give our input and our label some attributes. For our input, we use the type password. There are some useful attributes for our input elements. Let's use the required attribute for our input password. In order to submit this form, we need to type in a password. If we just leave it blank and hit submit, we have a little prompt, please fill out this field. We can't submit this form until we've typed something in. Note, since we use the type password, all the characters are hidden. Then we get the min length and the max length attributes, and this helps you set a minimum and a maximum length of characters to use. Then we get another button called the reset button, and the reset button resets your form. You can add a break line just to put your submit button on a new line, but we're going to use CSS later to style the layout. With text boxes, you can add a placeholder to give the user an idea of what we want them to enter in and in what format. Let's add a placeholder attribute. If you click on the text box, the placeholder is still there until you start typing something. Now let's check out email next. Input type equals email. For the ID, I will also set that to email. I will also add a placeholder, youremail@gmail.com. Again, the placeholders letting the user know the format in which way they should type in their information. The cool thing about the email type is, if I were to type in some text, but we're missing the @ sign, and click submit, we have the prompt, please type an email address because we're looking for a valid email address format. Next, we have the tel for telephone. I think you understand the for type and ID attributes now, so to save you some time, I will fast forward over these. The placeholder can match your country's telephone number. So currently the user can type in anything. But what if we want to limit the user to just use numbers? We can do this with the pattern attribute. For the digits 0 to 9 within a set of straight brackets, you would type 0 to 9, then how many digits do you want to allow? We can help the user with a title attribute to let them know that 10 digits are required. Alright, then we have dates, like for a user's birth date. Input type equals date. So with dates, there's an interactive calendar to select a date. Pretty simple. Next, we have the number attribute. The user is going to type a number or a quantity, like they're buying something. The type will be number. We can use these arrows to go up and down. However, normally you can go into the negative numbers. If we do not want this, we can set a minimum and a maximum with the min and max attributes. So the minimum will be 0. We don't want them to go below 0. And the maximum, I think 100 is good. So we can't go below 0, but we can go all the way up to 100. Then we can also add a default value with the value attribute. I'll set the default to be 1. Alright, then we also get radio buttons. Radio buttons are a little bit tricky. With radio buttons, you should only select one from a group. But first, we will need a label for our group. Let's name it title for Mr., a Miss, or a doctor. We will need individual buttons, so I'll create a label for Mr., Miss, and Doctor. So after each label, we'll create a radio button with the input type equals to radio. So now we have 3 radio buttons. With a group of radio buttons, you should only be able to select one. However, we can select all 3 buttons. That's because we need to add all of these buttons into the same group. We're going to add the name attribute. We'll name this attribute title. So whichever radio button you would like in the same group, they will need to share the same name attribute. So now we can only select one of these radio buttons. I'm going to wrap my radios in a pair of div tags. I'm also going to remove the break lines, as this will help me later with my CSS styling. A div in HTML is a container element. It's used to group together other HTML elements. It stands for division and is one of the most commonly used tags in web development. It doesn't add any visual change by itself. It's used to structure and organize content. It helps apply CSS styling or JavaScript behavior to a group of elements. Okay, let's create a drop-down menu. A good example for a drop-down is a payment option. Like what kind of card are you paying with? Is it a Visa, MasterCard or gift card? For a drop-down menu, instead of an input element, we're going to use a select element with opening and closing tags. For a select element, we have a drop-down menu, but there's no options. We will add option elements within our select element tags. Let's create 3 options. An option for Visa, MasterCard and also gift card. So for our first option, the value will be Visa and the text will be Visa. So we have 1 option so far. Let's add MasterCard and gift card. By default, the first option will be selected. To change this, we add an empty value and a text like select payment method. This will help to make the user select an option. Then we get file upload. For a file submission, again, we will follow the same pattern with a label and an input element. For file upload, we use the type file. By default, we can choose and accept all file types. If we want to limit the type of file that we are looking for, there is an accept attribute. This will help to only accept certain file types. Let's do an image for a PNG. That would be image/PNG. When I choose a file, we are looking for an PNG file. Now you can add more than 1 file type. Each file type is separated with a comma. Let's also look for any JPEGs. Now you can see we're looking for a bunch of file types. Anything within this range. Now if you're sending a large amount of data, there's one change we will need to make to our form. We're going to change the encryption type within the opening form tag. Let's say we're sending an image and the image is a large file. So we will set the encryption type equal to multipart/form data. In simple terms, when we send a large amount of data, we'll break it into multiple parts. Then when all the data is received, those multiple parts will be reassembled. It's a little more complicated than that, but for now, that's all you need to know. So if you're sending a large file such as an image, I would recommend changing the encryption type to multipart/form data. I think you understand the basics of HTML forms. So just quickly, to create a text area, we use the text area element with the opening and closing tags. You can change the dimensions of your text box by adjusting the rows and calls. I would like 4 rows. Rows are used to set the height of your text box. Calls are used to set the width in terms of number of characters per line. Nice. Then we have checkbox. I think a good use for a checkbox will be a subscribe button. For example, if a user wants to subscribe to a newsletter, they can use the checkbox. While we're on the subject, if you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing so you don't miss when I drop a new video. The input type equals checkbox. Alright, now let's make this very basic form awesome with CSS. Now create your CSS file and link it to your HTML document. I'm going to use an image as my background in this project, so if you are following along, get yourself an image to use if you want to. I just want to put this out there. CSS can be very confusing in the beginning, but the more you play around, the better you will understand it. It is a great feeling when you struggle to get something the way you want it and you finally crack it. Now let's start with some basic styling for our body. We add an image to our web pages using the background image property, and the value is a URL in brackets of the image file location. My file is a local file, but you can use any image from the internet by using that image URL. Let me show you a quick example. Now let's style our H1 quickly. If you're wondering how I got this color, I like using Paint's color picker to pick a color from a picture I used. Now let's give our form some styling. You can see with a few simple CSS code how the form is starting to get some shape. Let's select all our labels and give them some styling too. By default, label is an inline element, meaning it sits next to another element and doesn't break into a new line. Display block makes the element behave like a block level element. Block level elements take up the full width of their parent container. The parent container is the form element in this case. Block level elements start on a new line and we can apply width, height, margin and padding to it. Now, same as we did with our label, we are going to give our inputs some styling. As a side note, if you need to style your inputs according to their type, you can do this. Let's use our buttons for this one. As you can see, our text area is going over our form border. All we need to do is add it to our inputs. I don't like how much space our radio buttons and labels are taking up on our form. If you remember, I assigned a class called radio group to group them together for me. Let's fix this. Another cool thing about CSS is called accent color. This is nice if you would like to stick to a color for your web page, and with this we can change our blue circle to any color we want. Now let's style our payment dropdown. Now we can see we have an issue with our subscribe checkbox. It's being centered and I would like to have my checkbox next to my subscribe word. So what I did was to put my input checkbox inside my label. So we're having an issue because we gave all our inputs the same styling. Our checkbox is misbehaving here, and all we have to do is exclude it from our input styling using the negation pseudo class not and the input type. This will exclude our checkbox. Nice. Now let's just add our accent color to our checkbox also. Nice. Now the only thing left is the transparent background and a half effect for our buttons. And it's so easy to do. To get the transparency background, I had to use RGBA. This lets you add transparency to the color itself. By using RGBA, red, green, blue and alpha, where the alpha value controls how see-through the color is. If you would like to learn more about CSS or HTML, check out one of these videos and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.